I'm happy to have you back for this interview on Africa 24. Samia Nkrumah, daughter of Ghana's first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and former member of the parliament of Ghana, is our guest for today. She'll be talking to us about the legacy she's keeping for her father and how she intends crossing it to future generations. Thank you for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Can you tell us, Afreximbank on the sidelines of its 30th annual meetings is equally celebrating 30 years of existence. Tell us what you think about the progress of the bank and how the bank has put in efforts to help provide opportunities and create resilience.
There's no doubt that Afreximbank has helped many African states with loans. It's also appeared 30 years ago with a vision, a Pan-African vision, which somehow guides all its operations. And that's, I think, what impresses me the most. It's a Pan-African bank wanting to help countries, our African countries, to industrialize, to develop our manufacturing base. And it is driven by a certain ideas, a certain set of ideas. And I believe in this case it's Pan-Africanism. You can see that from the choices they make, even the topics we discuss. So for the 30th anniversary of existence, they are here in Accra, which used to be the center of Pan-Africanism, where Pan-Africanism really was inaugurated on African soil, because as you know, it started outside the continent by Africans living outside the continent, but it returned with Ghana's independence and with the emergence of Pan-African leaders like our father, who worked with Africans outside the continent, studied with them, practiced activism with them, and came back to start or initiate the process of African unity, bringing our African states together to plan our economies, and even they tried to unite those African states politically. So not just economic integration, but a shared political basis or vision for our development.
Talking about Afreximbank, the efforts of Afreximbank in the face of crisis, can you tell us how you think the bank has helped build resilience and help African economies recover from the effects of the crisis?
Yeah, of course, the Afreximbank has come to the rescue of many countries, including my base, Ghana, particularly during the COVID or just after the COVID crisis, if you will, for want of a better word. But even before that, like a decade earlier, when we were grappling with some debt restructuring issues. So it is encouraging and heartening to borrow from an indigenous bank, rather than from outside. It's a model for self-reliance, for starting to depend on ourselves, and thank God, a few decades after our independence, there is a strong or growing private sector or entrepreneurs, business leaders, captains of industry, as we call them, who are emerging, who have also a Pan-African approach. So I think this gathering is an example of when there's consensus amongst political leaders, amongst African civil rights leaders, or civil society leaders, civil society leaders, African entrepreneurs, and just the consensus that Africans must think together, plan together, and work together, and build our nations together. And that's really the essence of what our father was trying to tell us. Kwame Nkrumah was trying to tell us 60 years ago at the founding of the Organization of African Unity. We must work together to create wealth, to grow, and to restore the dignity of the African wherever he or she lives.
How do you view the role of DFIs, development finance institutions, in building prosperity for Africans?
It's very important because we definitely need to borrow. Governments need to borrow, private entrepreneurs need to borrow, but we need to borrow on good terms. We need to borrow with, low interest rates, longer periods of repayment. So we have to borrow to build our infrastructure, but it has to be done on terms that are a bit more favorable to us. And so the rise of these institutions, particularly on the continent, is a good sign or a step in the right direction. This is what we want to see. And as I said, it's so important for all these sectors to be led by people who have a Pan-African approach, who understand that our main task, the dominating thinking, or the dominant rather thinking, is for us to build our economies and restructure them so that we add value to our primary products. We want to be able to add value, use science, technology, our minds, human resource. We want to use that to add value to what we produce, what our land produces. So it's very important to have that mindset in all institutions in Africa, including, or even more so with financial institutions, because they are very much needed and we are dependent on them for our development.
Delivering the vision and building prosperity for Africans is the theme of this Afreximbank annual meetings. Can you explain to us how far this goal can be achieved in the context of instability in many countries of Africa, especially West Africa, and growing insecurity? You have growing insecurity and you have threats to stability in many countries of the continent.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there are about, I don't know, you might correct me, between 30 and 40 odd conflicts on the continent. And this has been happening for a while. And it will continue to happen until Africans are united, really. I mean, this is one of the consequences of having many, many states. Some of them we all know, and really we are not always economically viable. The future of Africa really is in unity. That's why I always like us to go back and recover our independence promise. We need to go back to the writings of our thinkers who initiated the independence journey, because political independence was simply the very first step to our full independence. Economic emancipation, that means relying on ourselves primarily, to cultural emancipation, finding our voice, our confidence, relying on our indigenous knowledge systems in everything we do, including politics, where there's no winner takes all, even if you have multi-party politics. But we have to include everyone and talk and talk and talk until we reach consensus. We don't want too much conflict in politics because we have an urgent task to develop. So I was saying that unity, putting our heads together, is the solution to security problems. So I started by saying, let us recover the original promise of independence, that we get our political independence and then we unite to build our economies. You see? So unity, freedom and unity were inseparable. We lost our way thinking individual states can make it on its own, but that is not the case, and time has proved that. So when Kwame Nkrumah, our dear father, gets up the eve of independence and he says the independence of Ghana is meaningless, it has no meaning. There's no significance unless it is linked up with the whole of Africa. And his concept of Africa was Africa and the African diaspora, the whole global African family. The Caribbean states, African living North America, Latin America, Asia, Australia, wherever they are. Because if you put 1.5, I think all Africans all over the world, including the continent, you can say 1.5, you can approximately or loosely say that. Imagine the power of 1.5 people coming under one political organization, a federation. They can be, we are going to be separate states with our independent autonomy or decision making on almost everything. But our father outlined 3 things where we have to find common ground. Our economies, planning continentally, like nowadays we are talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area. It's continental. We are not saying...
Let me just stop you there.
Please.
You spoke about uniting with the diaspora, the African diaspora, to build the prosperity and to build the foundation for Pan-Africanism and to keep that legacy your father did. Can you just tell us what governments can do to be able to reinforce this interconnectivity between the African diaspora and the Africans on the continent?
You mean how are we going to do that?
How do you think leaders can build up the relationship, the link between Africans and the diaspora?
Good, very good question, because first of all, we have to familiarize ourselves with them. I mean, several countries like my own base, Ghana, recently, a few years ago, we declared the year of return, then beyond the return, inviting the diaspora to come back home and look into ways and means of investing. But it has to go beyond that. We have to reach a point where we even would invite the diaspora into our political life. Africans everywhere should be able to have the citizenship. In Ghana, we've given, I think, over the last 4 years, about 500 or so, but we have to do more. They have to have the ability, enjoy the ability to contest elections, to vote. We really have to integrate the diaspora into our lives, because this is correcting the mistakes of the past. We are really one people. So our separation was not done by us voluntarily. It was done against our will. And time is proving that bringing our thoughts together would strengthen us, not just economically, but spiritually and even culturally. Because when you go back to your history and understand where you came from, what are the obstacles that fragmented us, that gives you strength, because you know what you have to do to become stronger. And then they are in a prime position, very good position, to lobby wherever they are, Africans, where they don't have to come back physically even. It would be nice. That's the ultimate. But even now, those who cannot come back, they can lobby, they can influence thinking wherever they are, so that the African voice can be heard.
Once again, so can you tell us about your vision for Pan-Africanism and how you intend crossing this vision your father laid the foundation to other generations?
Yes, we need to recover his writings to start with. Not just him. You have Sheikh Anta Diop, you have Theo Benga. They are I call these people philosophers. They're even prophets, because they visualized an Africa, a prosperous Africa, through unifying our forces, our resources, our human capital. They visualized it and they gave us a blueprint. So it is our task to revisit that blueprint. You know, I started saying that there were 3 things that they invited our father when he got up 1963. He wrote, by the way, this book, Africa Must Unite, which was distributed to the leaders on the eve of the founding of the OAU, which is today the African Union. So that book was distributed to the leaders to awaken, there's a sense and urgency for unity. And when he got up to speak, and it's all documented, there's documentary evidence of these proposals. He spoke about, I started saying the three things. Number one, economic continental planning for our development and the economy. And many of the things he said are what the AFCFT is trying to do. Number two, he spoke about another thing we must find common ground, that is foreign policy and diplomacy, having one voice, one position, non-alignments, but focusing on our development, not different African countries aligning here and there, but our first loyalty or focus is Africa, Africa first. Number three, common defense strategy, high command, military high command. Imagine if we had worked on that 60 years ago. By now we would have had a common Pan-African military force that can easily, from negotiating to even securing peace in many of our countries. But the thing to remember about all this, what I find fascinating and what I understand from reading our father, is that it is a political project. It's not something that is given to us. They gave us a blueprint, but it's something you and I, and the generation, even the ones coming after you, have to be struggling to work out. It's a project, an objective to achieve. So we have to put some effort into it. We have to start discussing and teaching Pan-Africanism in our schools and throughout our educational system. We have to imbibe ourselves, like all institutions, including the banking institutions, with a Pan-Africanist mindset, because that is the future for a prosperous Africa.
Talking about the Pan-Africanist mindset, since your father left us, may his soul continue to rest in peace, he will recall that he laid the foundation for Pan-Africanism in Africa. You definitely want to, there's a legacy of your father you definitely want to keep up for Africans. Can you just tell us about this legacy and the future projects you have for your country?
Yes, definitely. I've started the Kwame Nkrumah Pan-African Center to do just that.
Where is that?
No, here in Accra,
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
To my base, yes. I want us to have more of his writings, his books. We even want to do a movie on his life because there's so many stories that are very inspiring and encouraging, because for him the personal and the political were intertwined in a way. He lived his beliefs, if you like, and yesterday I spoke about even the marriage with marrying a woman from North Africa. His marriage with our mother was a Pan-African project, a personal Pan-African project to bring North Africa closer to the rest of the continent. And that's exactly what happened, that we helped each other in our liberation wars, and the North African states played a very strong part. So Africa is one.
Tell us about the objectives of this project. What are the principal objectives that you aim with this project?
To diffuse Kwame Nkrumah's main thesis for unity, that we must not just unite economically and not in separate bits and pieces, but on every level, including political union. The ultimate thing is to have a political basis, common political basis that will guide everything we do in Africa and for Africans.
Thank you so much, Mom, for answering our questions. Thank you so much. You were so elaborate.
Yeah, welcome.
The success of our independence lies on uniting all Africans. It is on this note that Samia Nkrumah, daughter of Ghana's first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and former member of the parliament, leaves us. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more programs.